setup options available.
And both these Terrapagos as well, rocking those choice specs, are really going all out on the damage here. Interesting as well to see a couple of utility moves, things like as well on the Flutter main, fake tears. Now, Chi-Yu can come in and just drop the special defense with Beads of Ruin, but if you can't do that naturally, you got to do it manually with the Flutter main and a potential fake tears. Whimsicott as well on the opposing side could be a fake tears user, but not today. Nils leading out with that Whimsicott and the Ogerpon here against the Flutter main and the Raging Bolt on Aurelien's side. It's the Paradox Pokemon leading out for Aurelien.
What a way to start up this fiery set. We do have a lot of different variety in terms of mind games to kick things off. Speed control is definitely a big key player in this situation. Flutter main, if it's able to get cheeky fake tears to allow further enablement of this Raging Bolt to pick up the KOs, that could really be an option that Aurelio has identified and wants to try to go down the path with.
I think that you could see the Nils was hovering over maybe terrestrializing as well and clearing in for it here. The Ivy Cudgel with the extra damage given to it by that terrestrialization could be devastating into Aurelien's side, particularly as considering the fact that the Raging Bolt is carrying that Assault Vest. You really want to hit it on the physical side of things. The beautiful terrestrialization straight out of the gates following turn 0 for this Ogerpon does leave it in a formidable spot.
And we do, of course, have the negating of the grass type no longer being available. So let's say there is any sort of electric type moves that do focus down on that slot, it will no longer be as effective. Icy Wind, though, does come out. We'll be guaranteeing a 2-hit KO onto that Whimsicott because of the critical hit, which is quite nice. But most importantly, there's no Tailwind that's been set up right now. Wanting to go on the offensive with this Moonblast does actually guarantee a 2-shot, which is very nice because of another critical hit.
And here comes the Draco Meteor into that Ogerpon, not enough to be able to get the KO. But I want to talk about that Whimsicott. It didn't go for Tailwind, instead goes for the Moonblast. Ogerpon able to now retaliate with this Ivy Cudgel. It's fast as fury. And Raging Bolt is gone. It bolts out of the field. A fantastic double up on Nils' side. And I really like this play. You don't go for the Tailwind. You go for that double up, knowing you can remove it from the field because Raging Bolt, such a formidable presence.
Wow, not what you commonly see. Having that embody aspect, bring its attack up to +1, and essentially without a critical hit, guarantee at least a 2-hit KO. Just shows and proves testament to how powerful this Ogerpon is. And maybe there could have been a scenario that the critical hit, because of the Moonblast, did put it within range. We will not yet find out. Maybe in some other games that will be coming up. But most crucial thing is that Raging Bolt was a key player. At least, though, it did get a situation to be able to deal a bit of damage on.
And Whimsicott being like, anything you can do, I can do better, going for that critical hit. And Whimsicott now in a position where it can go for that Tailwind. And I like how we're still able to outspeed the opposing Raging Bolt despite the Icy Wind drop that the Flutter main gave through. The issue, however, is going to be this Urshifu. It's holding the Focus Sash as well, so in Nils' side, you have to be cognizant you're going to have to hit it twice to be able to remove it from the fray. And something like a Sucker Punch as well is easily going to be able to clean up against that Ogerpon. Whimsicott, I think, very free to go for the Tailwind, and I would recommend it here for Nils. Even if you lose these Pokemon at the front, you know, they're kind of frail at the moment, you can bring 2 powerhouses in from the back to capitalize on that.
However, you have burned your potential of terrestrializing a Terrapagos from Nils' side if you do, of course, have it in the back. It does still pose a very huge offensive presence, as we will most likely find out as Tailwind has been set up. Moonblast will actually move first because of the Flutter main still outspeeding due to the -1 speed on that Ogerpon.
That Icy Wind was critical at the beginning for Aurelien, really setting up for these win conditions later in the game. Not every day we see a close combat go down into a Whimsicott, and never really do we see it get the KO. But thanks to the work that Flutter main was able to put in that first turn, it's actually utilized this double knockout situation here for Aurelien.
Yeah, and we do actually have a weird situation where Nils now can bring up all of the offensive pressure because of the Tailwind's been set up. It can guarantee will most likely outspeed, especially with that Urshifu being the Choice Scarf, does make its way on the field. However, Aurelio does still have that final Pokemon in the back. There may be room to allow for any defensive switches, which may even lead to trying to stall out these turns of Tailwind. And if the Flutter main can move, it can try to get and force that speed control via its Icy Wind, which we've already seen it try to capitalize on.
I like the idea of Surging Strikes just going into the Flutter main here, just trying to remove it from the field. Tailwind is up. You also have the Choice Scarf for good measure. And there isn't really a safe switch that Aurelien has anymore. The Raging Bolt is gone. The only options you've got is something like a Cerulege, Tornadus, or even the Terrapagos that don't really want to take these moves, particularly when Terra Shell will be broken by one of these hits. Here comes the second one, the third one, gonna follow up, and it will get the knockout.
Wow, that is just within range there. It could have easily have been a damage calc roll in that scenario, but it has been failed. Will force Aurelien to have to bring in that final 4 Pokemon, but not before the Terra Starstorm does bring that Urshifu down to its Focus Sash.
Good job it had that Focus Sash, eh? I think it needed it against that Terra Starstorm. It is able to retaliate with the close combat. It will go into Terra Shell, but because of the Terra Shell, it will be not very effective damage. Normally, completely different story, and now Terrapagos is exposed to another one of those. Urshifu, however, I think is a little bit more precariously placed on 1 HP.
Yeah, it sort of leans into Nils' strategy of this sort of hyper-aggressive form in order to pick up KOs fast and furious and force Aurelien to have to really take those hits in terms of losing the resource available to themselves. Urshifu is still on the field over on Aurelien's side, but we've still got the speed control heavily in Nils' side because you're able to at least guarantee KO onto the Urshifu, no doubt about it. But question is, can Aurelien's Terrapagos really pull through for themselves?
I think Nils just needs to break the Terra Shell on the opposing Terrapagos here, and then that will enable the Urshifu to go for these Surging Strikes and clean up. It is Choice Scarf, so it doesn't have the utility to change into that close combat and really apply a lot of damage. But something like the Surging Strikes, obviously that first attack is going to break that Terra Shell, leading the other two to be able to do a little bit more damage. Terrapagos in a position where it can then clean up. The Urshifu, however, on Aurelien's side, you generally really can't ignore. It is going to go for the Detect here, but I was going to say even if it attacks, it can only hit 1 Pokemon at a time.
It can, and it will, as it does try to target the Terra Shell. It will be breaking it. No Terrestrialization coming out from Aurelien just yet, wanting to be able to reserve itself as best as possible. And the really nice interaction here is because the Surging Strikes acts like a singular sort of move in that time, we've got the furtherment of the damage mitigation of the Terra Shell still coming into effect, as the Terra Starstorm is enough to actually clean up Aurelien's Terrapagos in what I felt may have been very close.
Do you know what? I'm jotting down that mechanic. That's new for me, and one I'm not going to underestimate in the future. But hey, when you've got Terrapagos by your side, you don't have to worry too much about that Terra Shell. It's enough to be able to just get the knockout. Of course, now for Aurelien, a little bit difficult situation. You have your Urshifu on the field. Sure, you could go for something like a Sucker Punch, just avoid trying to get around the Choice Scarf element of this opposing Urshifu, but the fact that it is a 2v1 situation means Nils is going to be in a prime position to start cleaning up. The one thing I like seeing from Nils there as well is looking at the overall board state of those 6 Pokemon, looking at what Aurelien has brought, maybe starting to think a little bit towards Game 2 because this is a best-of-3 set.
Yes, it really is a good shout because I feel like Aurelien was just really hoping that they'll be able to at least survive due to the Terra Shell mechanic there. Not quite enough. Is something, though, that Aurelien's going to really have to go back to the drawing board to be able to better assess. You know, you want to be able to, let's say, not allow the full advantage of having Tailwind and both of your sweepers on the field at the same time, because that's essentially what Nils just did, you know. Just got the setup initially, you know, got a bit of damage, which was actually quite crucial. We saw the critical hit Moonblast actually focus down onto the Raging Bolt. It was able to put it within range. You had the follow-up of the Ivy Cudgel. However, it's still the fact that you allowed the speed control to be set up whilst the Nils was able to just bring in both sweepers at the same time to capitalize.
I'm glad you mentioned the Raging Bolt, because although it didn't do too much in the battle, it was such a critical moment for Nils to be able to KO it. Just doubling down at the beginning of that match, getting rid of a Pokemon that can be so difficult to deal with, particularly if it's going for Electro Reps, lowering the speed on your side of the field. Thunderclap priority, something you just don't want to have to play the mind games of, I think was really, really nice for him. Yes, you took a lot of damage, but the key thing was getting that Tailwind up for the 2 Pokemon in the back. Bringing in the Urshifu and the Terrapagos at the end game just meant that you were giving overwhelming pressure to your opponent's side, and there really wasn't a lot that Aurelien could do once the speed was reversed in Nils' favor.
Yeah, and I think Aurelien from their side, they're gonna maybe even have to bring the Tornadoes if they really want to try to go for a sort of staggered mid to end game Tailwind and try to expire and, you know, exhaust all of the turns of momentum from Nils' side, which is quite difficult of an ask because you've just got so much damage output potential coming out from at least 3 of Nils' Pokemon if he so chooses to bring the same slots that he did. So, but if you're Nils, sort of, is there any reason to change things up? Because that's sort of the name name of the game. You just want to go for damage, have the Tailwind set up, and just hope that Aurelien has left an opportunity for you to start going ahead and getting the sweep underway.
I wouldn't be surprised to see Nils bring the same 4. I think the Regidrago is a little bit difficult here. You've got Pokemon like the Fluttermane, and you clearly have already demonstrated you don't need it to get rid of the opposing Raging Bolt. And indeed, with the Psychic Terrain, there aren't any fake-out setters on the opposing side, or users, I should say, that you don't really need Indeedee to bring that Psychic Surge onto the field. So I wouldn't be surprised to see any changes from Nils' side. Aurelien, however, one thing I would like to see is the Raging Bolt still come, but have it in the back. Just have it so that it can come in and actually do what it wants to do without being pressured on Nils' leads. Because if Nils leads again with something like that Ogerpon and the Whimsicott, not only do you have the pressure of the speed control, but you have that utility option to double down into it. Again, whether or not the Moonblast critical hit was critical or not is something we still need to figure out. But I would love to see Raging Bolt come in the back and sweep and close up a game.
Ooh, but we actually have a change-up from both of our trainers. Tornadus alongside the Terapagos over on Aurelien's side versus that Indeedee actually being brought with an immediate redirection pressure as to accompany and assist the Choice Specs Terapagos over on Nils' side. So you got immediate damage potential yet again. Sure, you could even opt to go for a Trick Room setup now that we've seen Tornadus has been brought over on Aurelien's side.
One thing I like about Indeedee as well, Psychic Terrain's on the field, and yes, you don't have any fake out to stop, but you do have the potential Scary Face coming through from this opposing Tornadus that would be trying to lower the speed on Nils' side. Nils has an option now. Yes, you've got the Trick Room, but I think for me, the Indeedee's more about the helping hand. If you've got a way to be able to boost the damage that the Terapagos can go for, that puts you in a really, really great position. At the same time, if you do go for that Trick Room as the opponent goes for Tailwind, that could be really, really nice.
Oh, but we have an evasion of the Terapagos with that Bleak Wind Storm. Not quite enough to be able to connect, unfortunately, but Terra Shell is going to be procced and broken thanks to the Terra Starstorm over on Aurelien's side, which is going to be reciprocated from Nils' side as well. So just both of the trainers feeling each other out right now, not wanting to commit to the speed control initially from Aurelien's side, but the Trick Room has now been set up. Aurelien not going straight away for the Scary Face allows them a bit more room to be able to consider whether the Trick Room was going to get set up or not. So both trainers a bit hesitant, but wanting to play a bit safe.
I think as well, it would have been nice for Nils to capitalize on maybe Aurelien going for a Tailwind here, but when you know you're up against a potential Trick Room, it's too risky to click that button. So I like how Aurelien played that, going for the Bleak Wind Storm, going for some damage. Indeedee now drawing in some type of attacks, kind of saying, hey, your Terra Shell's broken, I've got your back, I will take the Terra Starstorm coming my way, which is exactly what Aurelien has gone for here. Indeedee not able to take it thanks to a critical hit, will be KO, but this does give Nils a Pokemon that could switch in and capitalize on Trick Room later on.
That's quite tough because it did have the Psychic Seed that gave it the +1. It's special defense, but it is enough. Nils' Terapagos has completely knocked out Aurelien's. One restricted down, and guess what? Bleak Wind misses yet again, completely bounced off by the stellar performance of this restricted.
There's a reason why we don't normally see Tornadus in Trick Room, and I think it's, you know, shaking off some of those nerves being in an unfamiliar environment. Nils has two very interesting Pokemon in the back. Whimsicott, again, a Pokemon we don't normally see in Trick Room, so I like this thinking from Nils to bring in something like the Regidrago. Obviously, we don't know how it's built, but if it is a more slow and bulky mode, this could be a fantastic opportunity to just go for some big damage, particularly considering Raging Bolt is in the back. Psychic Terrain's on the field, so you can't even worry about Thunderclap. Possibly, this Regidrago could clean things up for Nils.
Yeah, and there is an interaction, awkwardly, if Nils does go for the Stellar Terra on that Terapagos, it will be getting rid of the Psychic Terrain, allowing that priority to come back into fray. However, having this dual speed control mode from Nils is really, really nice to see. I absolutely love the strategy because you're able to adapt mid-game in order to better position yourself in your board state versus Aurelien.
And a great call there, Costa. The Terraform Zero coming into effect will wipe the Psychic Terrain from the field. And that's actually quite nice considering your Whimsicott's just joined the battle. You want it to be able to go for any prankster potential it's got here. Most notably, Encore would be the thing that Psychic Terrain would have stopped. Raging Bolt went for the Draco Meteor though. Fairy type in its place, not going to deal any damage as Terrakabos can go for the Terra Starstorm as it is now in this beautiful and bejeweled phase. It will hit both the opposing Pokemon here with Terra Stellar damage. Not able to get the KO, but definitely puts Tornadus in a vulnerable spot.
It Very well does as the Bleakman finally connects with the Terrapagos and does actually break that focus sash over on the Whimsicott side whilst being able to drop its speed. So I don't think it's quite enough to be able to allow it to underspeed Raging Bolt and get a cheeky Moonblast focus onto it. But the fact that Raging Bolt does underspeed this Terrapagos does allow it a bit more room to be able to get those attacks off, or maybe even better set up the end game once Trick Room does expire to have the speed control force with the Electro Webs, and even just pick up that Whimsicott since it's at 7 hit points remaining.
I mean, Nils is kind of leaving Tornadus unchecked here at the moment. Yes, it's not too much of a threat, but these Bleakwind Storms, when they do connect, particularly on a grass-type Pokemon like the Whimsicott, are going to be able to deal a huge chunk of damage. And I think Nils switching it in, knowing safely it's got the Focus Sash, it kind of has a bit of respite, has been lovely for it. It can go for this Protect, start stalling through the Trick Room turns a little bit more, but you want to be able to see it shine. Tornadus going for the Scary Face on its partner. Fantastic, going to be able to lower the speed harshly in this Trick Room environment, allowing it to then go for the Electro Web, not able to connect onto that opposing Whimsicott and try and get a knockout, as it is able to connect on Terrapagos. There goes the speed.
Yeah, I think that may have actually been a really nice play in anticipation of the Electro Web, forcing this Terrapagos to be even slower under Trick Room conditions, as the Tornadus does get picked off. No critical hit there would have actually, I don't think, mattered in that case, given the HP range and the damage we saw in the prior turn. However, we've got this Raging Bolt free to go for another Electro Web while still underspeeding that Terrapagos.
And that's the key thing, because you're also setting up for when Trick Room is over, right? You want to make sure that your Urshifu is in prime position. We have seen all 4 Pokemon on Nils' side, so you don't have to worry about a potential Choice Scarf Urshifu in the back, but you do have to worry about that Regidrago. If it's able to go for something like the Dragon Energy and get a lot of advantage on the field, maybe Whimsicott sets up a Tailwind now, just anticipating that the Trick Room will be reversed soon. That could be very, very difficult for Aurelien to work around.
And I think that is definitely something key that most likely both trainers do actually acknowledge. However, it's just down to the granular sort of interactions on the mind games. Do you try to opt to go on the defensive or just full aggro it? As we actually finally see the terrestrialization from Aurelien's side, it is going to be the Electric Terror. It is going to be threatening a lot more damage because of this ferocious damage output sweeper.
I love this as well. The Thunderclap's in play. There's no more psychic terrain. You don't even have to worry about the Scary Face because it's priority. Look at that. Terrapagos is gone before it can utilize these last turns of Trick Room and get damage on the board. Now you've got the Whimsicott looking down against this opposing Urshifu. It is a Focus Sash as well, so even if it is a Moonblast, then it's going to be difficult. Encore, I don't think it worries about encoring into Thunderclap at this point in time, I'm afraid.
It may well not, as the close combat will guarantee the KO onto the Whimsicott, forcing Nils' Regidrago to be the final front that Aurelien's going to have to try to overcome to force this Game 2 affair into a Game 3, as Trick Room does now expire. We know that this Urshifu does have that sash, so it will at least guarantee 2 wicked blows in a row, as typically they do tend to be much faster than the Regidragos.
We've only seen the Regidrago as bait so far in this particular game, so we're still unsure if it's fast or slow. But even said, as you've mentioned, Urshifu has the potential to go for something like a Sucker Punch. Raging Bolt can go for the Thunderclap. There isn't really a lot that Raging Bolt can do. Even if it is able to go for something to KO the opposing Raging Bolt, it has to hit Urshifu twice. So Aurelien has perfectly pivoted Pokemon and keeping that Raging Bolt in the back for later, coming forward now to apply pressure with the Electric Terror boosted Thunderclap as well, has put him in a phenomenal position to close out this Game 2. There's not a lot Regidrago can do.
No, there very much isn't, because at this point you just need to have that redirection available, or at least outspeed. But then you're still susceptible, like you correctly mentioned there, Lou, to the double priority potential on both the Urshifu and the Raging Bolt. So this is just going to have to be a bit of time to allow Nils to refigure out how he's going to approach Game 3, as the Thunderclap is not quite enough to pick up any sort of respectable damage. But guess what? The close combat very well is. Who needs Wicked Blow when you've got close combat critical hits?
I mean, the Regidrago had a spread move option in the form of that Dragon Energy, but then the Thunderclap, yes, it doesn't do too much damage, but let's just say hypothetically the Dragon Energy could have come off there. It's going to be still severely weakened by that Thunderclap, and with close combat following up anyway, who needs to even worry about the Regidrago? But that's good information for Aurelien as well going forward into Game 3. And this is what I love, Costa. A Game 3 situation between 2 so established players, and in Game 1, Nils was very much in command, getting rid of that Raging Bolt. In Game 2, Aurelien was very much in the driving seat, going for those Scary Faces, being able to just make sure that he had all the priority, potential, and speed advantage outside of Trick Room. Going into Game 3, I wonder if we're going to see any more changes. Nils made very drastic changes from game 1 to game 2. Is he going to change back to game 1?
I feel like Ogerpon is just very well placed here.
Yeah.
Because you're able to directly threaten so much damage. You don't necessarily have to terrestrialize it. You can, if you really want to, lean a bit onto the Stellar Terra from Terrapagos, but we did actually see that he really didn't need to. As long as you have that Terra Starstorm and you can focus down with 120 base power onto one of the targets to be able to lock in and put it within range for a subsequent pickup is key. And I think Aurelien, even though I really would love to see the Ceruledge, I don't think it will likely make it through, because I'm trying to think of the scenario that's helpful and I can't find any.
Yeah, yes, it can do stuff to the Whimsicott, but then we've seen the Whimsicott KO twice by a close combat. So I feel like you don't need that to deal with the Whimsicott at this point in time.
Yeah.
I think for me, you're right. The Ogerpon's definitely a key piece for Nils, and it can apply a lot of offensive pressure out there on the field. I want to see, however, if either trainer decides to go for the Terraform Zero and terrestrialize up that Terrapagos,
yes.
I want them to make sure that the Terra Starstorms are in a position where they can get the knockout. Because when it's not dealing enough damage to get KOs, you're leaving it so vulnerable to a double up. And it is such a threat. These trainers cannot just ignore it on the field. And if you lose it, not only do you lose your restricted, you use a terrestrialization Pokemon and a fantastic spread move option.
I do genuinely see the value on not Stellar Tearing both of the Terrapagos, because you've got the Terra Shell. It will reduce any damage being focused onto that slot while still guaranteeing so much damage to whittle down and put your opponent's Pokemon within range. So honestly, I don't even want to see Nils Terra the Terrapagos. I just want to see the damage coming out, and maybe a cheeky little Ogerpon Terra once again. But we are gonna have to find out as game 3 is here. We've got the Tornadus and Terrapagos over on the Aurelien side versus Terrapagos, and another little cheeky prankster Pokemon being a Whimsicott over on Nils.
Yeah, I like the synergy here. Both these trainers have the capability to go for that Tailwind, go for the fast mode, and they also have the restricted Terrapagos on the field. Now, I kind of agree with you. I don't necessarily want to see terrestrialization because Terra Shell has been such a great ability in this particular game, particularly when you've got close combating Urshifus. At this point in time, though, do you want to sacrifice that to a potential Bleak Windstorm coming through from Tornadus, considering if it does able to find its mark, however? Whimsicott able to just do what it does best, going for the Tailwind. Early doors here for Nils, no messing around, wants to get the speed up there. No Tailwind critically on the opposing side, as the Terra Storm is able to come through. Not enough, though. This is what I'm saying. You need to get the knockouts.
No, but the Bleak Windstorm does miss the Whimsicott. I feel like that's what Aurelien was really trying to bank on there, to be able to not focus down on the Tailwind, not be susceptible to Encore the subsequent turn, as Terra Starstorm does focus down on the Terra, because not quite enough to pick up the KO, but my word, 14 hit points is so very close to getting picked up off.
And the Whimsicott now still has its Focus Sash intact as well, so the Bleak Windstorm not only able to have dealt a significant damage, but putting it in a very dangerous spot. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Tornadus on the opposing side try and get a Tailwind up here, but Whimsicott does have Encore, and that's a problem, because if you want to lock it down into something, then it cannot get the speed advantage up. But Whimsicott's saying, not today, I'll let you get that up on your side.
As the Moonblast is going to be the move of choice, now breaking the Terra Shell over on Aurelien's side of the field in order to allow a follow-up, but now it's pretty critical on which Terrapagos will move first. It is going to be Nils. It is going to be Taki. The Terrapagos does pick up the KO. Moonblast just barely putting it within that range to be able to knock it out.
Nils with such a commanding start to this game 3, removing the restricted Pokemon on Aurelien's side of the field, but does leave Aurelien free to bring this Urshifu in. The Terra Shell has been broken to Terrapagos. Honestly, a Bleak Windstorm would even KO it at this range, so I wouldn't be surprised to see Bleak Windstorm come out, maybe a double up coming through into that Whimsicott, but we know Whimsicott is fast. Something like the Moonblast could even deal with this Tornadus.
Yes, it very well can, and Urshifu having the Focus Sash is very well placed to be able to at least guarantee picking up a KO onto the restricted, or even keeping it intact depending on which slot it targets down, as the Tornadus is now out of this game 3 and set. Wicked Blow, targeting the Terrapagos, wanting to guarantee that restricted does not keep on going on this absolute havoc path that it has been wreaking.
Yes, and you can see the Pokemon in the back as well for Nils. That Ogerpon back into the team, able to apply some pressure with those Ivy Cudgels, but Raging Bolt joins the fray as well for Aurelien. My eyes are on this Whimsicott, though. It's being left really unchecked on the field at the moment. Focus Sash still intact, and Moonblast definitely going to be able to deal significant damage to both these opposing Pokemon, as well as the threat of that Encore. That's something the Urshifu has to contend with. If it wants to go for something like a Detect, it cannot do that so safely. The one thing you've got to contend with, though, is the Urshifu because it is a dark type, isn't going to be affected by that Prankster.
No, it very much won't be. And the fact that the Whimsicott still has its sash intact does allow it even more breathing room to get damage off. Something that you don't commonly see Whimsicott really trying to focus down on, as the Detect will be able to nullify any attempts on breaking that sash over on its side of the field. But no terrestrialization just yet. Ivy Cudgel, wanting to try to guarantee knocking out that Urshifu, but this opens up the Raging Bolt to try to get an Electro Web. But guess what? This Whimsicott, it's as flailing as the wind. It's able to weave itself around, completely miss any webs and any storms.
Now able to just go for a Tailwind. You know, I'm sure that Urshifu going for that Detect very safely in the face of the Prankster Pokemon does give it a little bit more flexibility. You can always go for something like the Wicker Blow and try and deal with this opposing Ogerpon here, because yes, the Whimsicott can go for the Moonblast, but there's enough utility for a 2v1 to be able to remove it from the field.
Yeah, and this opens up Aurelien to be able to actually Dark Terrastalize that Urshifu, go for the Wicked Blows. And at least once you get Electro Web dealt and connected finally onto the Whimsicott, you may even put it within range of a Sucker Punch focus as well, if the damage output is enough.
That's the thing, the Focus Sash as well on that Urshifu will give it a little bit more longevity on the field. There's the Wicker Blow, like you said, boosted up by the Dark Terrestrialization here, going into the Ogerpon with the critical hit, of course, but not able to get the knockout. Raging Bolt follows up, though, and says it's okay. It's gone from the field, and now Nils also has only 2 Pokemon remaining.
Yeah, and actually trying to target down with the Moonblast is quite critical for Nils' gameplay here, because you needed to stop the momentum from this Urshifu. So you sort of had to make that trade in order to further improve your board state and rely on that final Pokemon in the back. If it is the Regidrago, get that Tailwind set up, stagger out and expire the Tailwind setup from Aurelien's side, and try to go for as much damage as you can.
I love this as well, because Regidrago's got in outside of the Electro Web, so if Whimsicott can get that Tailwind up, it's in such a great pressure to go for that Dragon Energy. Spread move will be able to remove Urshifu from the field. You've got to watch out, though, for the Raging Bolt. It is carrying that Assault Vest, so it could be in a position where, particularly if it goes for something like the Thunderclap, will be able to hang on from taking a Dragon Energy. But it's a nice way to get damage on the board, remove the Urshifu from the field, and allow the Whimsicott to follow up with a Moonblast. But first, you've got to get the Tailwind up.
You very well do, but we're going to see a bit of defensive plays coming out from both of our trainers here. The Urshifu and that Regidrago being the main sweepers. Moonblast trying to lock down that slot. Feels like it still has room to be able to navigate around, since it still did have that sash, but it's susceptible to paralysis that, unfortunately, for Aurelien did not connect. And the Whimsicott, the fact that it's got a guaranteed 3-hit KO survival from Thunderbolt allows it more room to take those liberties and not necessarily set up Tailwind and further exhaust any additional turns that you can capitalize off of.
The thing is, Whimsicott now sitting a little less pretty on the field. Its Focus Sash is broken. We know there's not anything really priority-wise on Aurelien's side that can remove it from the fray, particularly if it does want to go for a Tailwind and it's not going for an attacking move. But the issue is this Regidrago. You've got to protect it well, because otherwise Aurelien is going to be able to come through in this match. Nils does still have access to the Terrestrialization. I think putting all the kind of weight and momentum into this Regidrago is what he needs to try and close out this set. 2 incredible players, game 3 in this set. Regidrago is not messing around. Let's see if he can do it.
Yeah, Dragon Terror means that the Regidrago is here for the business. Tailwind and no protects from either side. Sucker Punch is gonna be the move of choice from the Urshifu, targeting down the Regidrago, limiting the damage output of a Dragon Energy. However, no energy to be found. Dragon Pulse in combination with the Dragon Terror on Assault Vest. How much damage does it deal? It deals enough damage, and it picks up the KO on an Assault Vest. Raging Bolt in raging fashion, allowing this Urshifu to now be susceptible to a Moonblast and focus on the Regidrago.
Regidrago deserves that roar of redemption that it got there at the end of that turn. Urshifu can go for the Sucker Punch all it likes. Moonblast on the Whimsicott will be able to come through and clean this up for Nils Dunlop. Amazing to be able to see the Regidrago come in, that last hurrah, and has done all it needs to do to help out this little Whimsicott. It's not just a supportive role, it's a shining star on the stage.
Ah, look at these trainers embracing. We've got Nils, your winner of round 5.
Wow. Wow. That's all I have to say.
That's all you can say, Lou.
It's honestly amazing. Nils Dunlop coming off an incredible EUI